I was recently commissioned to make a spiderweb necklace for a friend of mine as a surprise present. I have no shortage of inspiration in my garden. All of the footage of these spiderwebs actually came from my garden. So here's a glimpse at the finished product. It's a crystal, a Czechoslovakian crystal necklace with Swarovski crystals at the base, the red crystals of the Swarovskis. I really wanted it to be, very delicate looking. So you'll see I have a piece of Lacey's Stiff Stuff, which is perfect for beading foundation. And next to me is a pile of the crystal chain that I used. It's a 3mm Czechoslovakian black crystal chain set in silver. Now I use a compass to draw the line for the neck, and this will just depend on how wide you want the neck opening to be. And then make it a little bit larger for the next line around to get a basic idea of where the collar will sit. So because of all the detail in a spider web, a lot of time was taken just measuring things to make sure that my spider web looked really good. So, I've measured sort of 3/4 across the piece of lacy stiff stuff, and then in the center to get a center point for making the circles. Then I'm using a protractor to get around a nice even lines for where the spider web will go. And I think it was about 10 degrees, along that I did each marking, and then of course use my center point to draw out the lines for the spider web. So you can see they're nice and even there. I put a few more lines up the top, and you'll see in a moment that this is the top of the necklace that will go sort of behind the neck. So now that I've got my markings there, I'm starting out by putting in the first row of crystals. This is just where the necklace neckline starts. I just made sure that this would be long enough that it would sit sit sort of on the collarbone, and also I added at the end an extender chain so that it could be adjusted if that didn't quite fit. I couldn't measure the lady's neck who this is for because it's a surprise, so I had to sort of use a little bit of educated guess for the length. Now you see I cut out a hole in the middle of the piece there. That's just at the moment as a place to sort of hold the stiff stuff. I don't do too much cutting straight away, just to keep the integrity of the beading foundation. As you bead on the foundation, it starts to become softer. So I try not to cut away too much too soon. So now I'm creating the lines for the spider web, and I want them to graduate. So this is going to be the longest point. I'm starting in the middle for that reason. So this is the middle point of the necklace and the longest piece, and then I'll work back from that to graduate it smaller as it goes around the neck. So I'm graduating it, I think it was about 3 or 4 links shorter. You can see this chain is perfect for sewing because it's got the links between each crystal, and those that spot is perfect to add a stitch. I'm being very, very careful with my stitching because I know that I want to cut this out later. So all of the stitching needs to sit under the crystal. That's can be quite tricky, so you do need to really plan your stitching, and you know, you may need to tie off your thread and restart again if you're starting again somewhere else in the necklace, or carefully work your way through the necklace, work your thread through the necklace to the point where you want to sew again. So you can see it's graduated a fair bit. You can make this any length you want really, and it depends on how long you want it around your neck. I would suggest though, because of the way this necklace is designed, you want to make sure that the holes between the web can be large enough, so you don't want to make that too small. And that was part of my consideration when I was doing the design, was just allowing enough room between areas that I could cut out the design and have a nice decent hole. Now it can get a little bit caught on this chain, the thread. So just be really careful as you're sewing through. You might need to guide the thread through with your other hand as you pull the needle through, just so that it doesn't start catching on the silver claws that holds each crystal in. If it does, just be careful to, carefully pry it free. Now you can see the curve on this protractor is perfect to make a really nice spiderweb shape. So I use this all the way along to make a really even, nice curve. If you don't have a protractor, you could just use something cylindrical that is the right size for your project, as a tracing way to trace the line that you want to make. So now that I have that line in place, I am sewing in the crystal. I'm cutting the crystal chain for each segment. So you can see I've got my little Lindstrom cutters. If you haven't used Lindstrom cutters, they're fantastic. I love them. They're probably my favourite type of like wire cut or what have you. They just cut things so nicely. So now that I've got that first row in, I'm going in again with a second row. I am, you may see a little bit there, I'm sort of moving it down, like angling it down so that it comes to a point at the front of the neck. So it's not even across the design. The first few spiderweb shapes, I think I did about 3 crystals down, but then I'm angling that from about 3 crystals to 6 crystals, so on a slant, if that makes sense. And that's basically because I did make the piece longer at the front, so I'm just continuing that, you know, with the other rows of spiderweb. So it's coming along there. You can see again that shape that I was talking about, how it's coming down on an angle as it comes towards the front of the neck where it will sit. And I do a 3rd row as well, and I do the same sort of thing for that. So here's that 3rd row that I'm putting in there. And I don't continue that up the neck either, because it would just be too, there wouldn't be enough room to cut out the holes for the spiderweb. So I just let it stop after the front of the necklace. Now I decide to go in between the crystal links with some, this is actually Czechoslovakian Charlotte beads in a size 13, and strangely enough, if you're familiar with seed bead sizes, you would know that generally speaking size 13 should be larger than size 15, but for some reason these Czechoslovakian ones are smaller than a Japanese size 15. I really like this size though, it's so handy. There have been quite a number of times where I've needed a size smaller than a 15, and that's where these come in. I buy mine from Over the Rainbow, but I presume if you were to buy any size 13, has to be Czechoslovakian. I don't believe they come in this size for the Japanese ones, or at least it wouldn't be a size 13, it would possibly be, I don't know if they have sizes smaller than the 15 actually, but maybe say a size 20 or something in a Japanese seed bead. And of course, because it is a Charlotte bead, that basically means that it has a cut on each bead. So it just means one side of the bead has been flattened off, and it creates a sort of facet to the bead, which gives a lovely sparkle. So that's an added bonus for using these. This just basically covers up the stitches that I was doing over the crystal earlier. And, you know, it adds a bit more strength as well to the crystal. Virtually all of the crystal that I've put on, you don't see all of the footage of it, but I actually have stitched over it twice with black thread when I've initially attached it, and then a further time because I'm adding these crystals on. I want it to be really, really strong. Now this part's very tricky, and I recommend using some embroidery scissors, which are generally just really, really small, sharp scissors. It's quite tricky. You want to get in as close as you can with your cuts, but you don't want to cut the stitching, and you know, you want it nice and even. So this took a little while. I basically pierced each section with my scissors first, and then cut close to the crystal. I'm cutting it this way round so I can see the stitches, basically to ensure that I don't cut through the stitches. And I learnt this the hard way, because there's been a number of times where I finished a piece and then I've gone to trim the foundation thinking I had plenty of room and can cut it no problem, and then I cut through some thread and basically had to re-stitch sections of the piece again because it came loose, and you know, you've got to find a spot to sort of tie it off again. Now I'm gluing the piece ready to put on top of or to back it with the ultra suede. I'm actually just using, I think it's called Dual Bond. It's sort of a PVA really, and I don't mind this. I actually quite like using this when I'm attaching the foundation to ultra suede, because the glue is a bit easier to get into fine details, as you can see here, compared to E6000, which I find doesn't apply as neatly to things. The applicator of that isn't as good, and I've tried ones with thinner applicators only to have it clog up. So this one works really well. And also don't worry if you get a bit of glue, you know, as you saw I got a bit of glue between things that sort of slid across the ultra suede a little bit. You know, you'll be chopping off all those bits anyway, so it's no big deal. Now, I highly recommend having a look on, I think it was eBay that I used for my ultra suede. I used to buy my ultra suede from beading shops, but they seem to want to cut them into sizes smaller than an A4, which is not great for large large chokers or large collar or bead necklaces, as some people call them. So I ended up getting a massive, like I think it was 2 or 3 meter sheet of black ultra suede that wasn't cut, and that way I can make necklaces as large as I want, and I've got backing that fits that piece, because the last thing I want to do is to have seams through my ultra suede. I want one singular piece of ultra suede on the back. And I should mention the reason that you use ultra suede if you haven't done embroidery beading, it is because it doesn't fray. So it's nice, lightweight, it trims up easily. I used to use leather because that also doesn't fray, but of course leather is harder to stitch, more expensive, and a little trickier. So ultra suede is fantastic to use, and I pretty much don't use any leather anymore. Now I've cut all my pieces away, and you can see that I've got black beads that I'm doing the edge work with, and these are a size 15. Again, I've used the Charlottes, so they have the cut on them. It's basically like a ladder stitch, the way that you do this edge work. You know, you need to start off with 2 beads just because of the way that you have to do that initial stitch, and then come back up from the bottom to the top of the second bead, and then from that point on you can just add 1 bead at a time. You're putting the bead on the needle, you're sewing through a couple of millimeters from the edge of the piece, pulling it tight, and then coming from the bottom of the bead to the top of the bead again, and that just makes each bead sit straight next to each other and lined up really neatly, and each stitch that you do, just keep them even along the piece. Takes a bit of practice to get your beadwork neat, but you know, if you do a piece like this, by golly, you get a lot of practice. My fingers were red raw by the end of this piece. Also, I'll just mention, I probably broke about 5 needles doing this because I was being lazy and I couldn't be bothered to go and get my sharp needles. So when I say sharp, so there's different types of needles. You can have beading needles, which are long, slender needles, and then you can have what are called sharps. Sharps are little short stubby needles, and you can get them in different sizes. So where you can see me stitching here, when you see the needle in the shot, and I've now moved on to using a sharp needle. It's quite a small needle, but because it is short, it's less likely to break, so it's perfect for things like edge work and stuff like that. Now I've pulled out some cyan, ruby, Swarovski crystals in the little droplets that I'll use there, and some little bicones. Along with that, I decide to go for a sort of slate grey silver lined bead. I think technically the name is black diamond silver lined, and these are actually size 11. So I put 1 seed bead, the crystal, and then 3 seed beads for that first stitch. I'm basically trying to graduate my little red droplets on each point of the spider web. So this next one I'll use 4 of the seed beads, and instead of a bicone, I'm using one of these little faceted crystal drops. So you can see there I have the 4 seed beads, then the crystal, and then I'll use another 4 seed beads, and then I just go up through the ultra suede there to attach it. For each of these little crystals, I am going through them twice. I don't know if I show that in the footage. I didn't want to bore you guys watching hours of stitching, so some of that I don't think I showed. So this is the center point at the front. So for this one, to make it even longer, I'm using a seed bead, a bicone, I think 4 more seed beads, or I think 5 seed beads, sorry, and then the crystal and another 4 seed beads. And if you can see there, when I go back through, I go through one of the seed beads as well as the bicone and the last seed bead there, and that just makes it sit really nicely and come to a point. So again, back to the 4 seed beads, crystal, and 4 seed beads. After I do each of these points and crystals, I am actually tying the thread off rather than trying to stitch through the beadwork, because I just want to make sure it's nice and neat. So it is a bit of a pain, but you know, it's worthwhile. So again, like the very first one I did, it's 1 seed bead, bicone, 3 seed beads, and you can see by doing the 3 seed beads and then I go straight back through that crystal, they sit in a little point at the bottom of the crystal, which looks quite nice. So there's all the beadwork all finished. Just time to put on the end bars. So these I find are great for any sort of bib necklace. I would have liked some longer ones for it, but I didn't have any on hand. So I just went with these ones. The main thing is to keep them even. So to do that, I'm actually starting in the center. If that doesn't work for you, you can do it however you like. Just make sure that both ends sit nicely. You can see I'm also going in with the crystals, and this is generally how I like to finish things like this off. I just like the look of it. So what I do though is I go through one side with a crystal, but there's a seed bead on either side of that crystal, and that is to stop the thread, or hopefully reduce the possibility of thread from cutting from the crystal. Because it's a 5 bar and I'm using a crystal on each side, I end up using 10 crystals. So now I'm just wanting to recreate the same thing on the other side. So wherever you've put your bar, you want to line this up. And so you can see there's a little bit of a gap where your chain and clasp can go. I'm using a sterling silver lobster clasp. I'm using the Beadsmith jump locks. They are really great because they kind of almost clip into place. You know, when you attach a jump ring, it can be less strong than using a split ring. But these jump locks, I don't know how they do it. I really don't know how they do it. But you have to wiggle them back and forth, and then you hear this sort of click, and they're really strong. So that's it. There's the finished piece. I didn't show it, but I did end up adding a spider onto the chain at the back as well. So a great project if you love gothic pieces and enjoy doing embroidery work. I really enjoyed making this one. So I hope you liked this tutorial. Please subscribe if you like my videos. It'd be great to have you as part of the Craft Nerd family. And we'll see you next time.